You guys, it's great to have you guys here. We're in our second week of the series called Break Free. Last week we talked about addiction, many different types of addiction that we have. You guys can go online to YouTube, Activate HB, all one word, and look at those. You can watch those videos. You can go back into the past and just search for different titles and things you might be interested in. There's a pretty big catalog there now, actually. There's hundreds of messages up there that you can go back and watch if you'd like to. And I would encourage you to do that. It's not a bad thing to get into God's Word and see what He might have to say to you. It's easy. One thing, the great part about teaching and preaching is that as we read through the Scriptures, it's easy to just kind of gloss over the parts that we don't want to deal with. But when somebody's standing in front of you, hitting you with those Scriptures, and you're like, I can't, he's actually talking to me, you know. So it's good in that way, because sometimes if you're honest, and if I'm honest, it's hard to read the Scriptures where we know we need to take action on that, right? Like that's a problem I have with my tongue, or the way that I treat people, or what I do with my money, or those aren't always things that we want to hear. Like my kids, when I try to encourage them to do the right thing, they're not always happy about me encouraging them to do the right thing, or discouraging them from doing the wrong thing. They don't like that. And as children, God's children, we don't always like that either. But it's important because growing things change. We can't keep doing the same thing over and over and over again, expecting a different result. So this week, we're going to talk about breaking free from expectations. Expectations. You might go, expectations, that's an interesting word. Now, depending on the context, it can have a negative connotation or a positive connotation, right? Like it's good to be an expectant mother. You're excited about that. Hey, expectant mother and father. We're gonna have a baby. That's expectation. That's very good. But then there are also expectations that we put on life, jobs, people, that maybe we shouldn't be expecting those things. Maybe it's not something that's ever going to happen for us. See, when we follow Christ, there are good things we can do. We can expect good things also. We can expect a life of adventure. I've been on this adventure for 42 years, and it's been an adventure. There are things that happened that I expected. There are things that happened that I didn't expect. Whether you've been on the roller coaster ride with Jesus Christ for very long at all, the reality is your life is still an adventure, isn't it? Like there are things that have happened in all of your lives that you didn't expect. I will say this, if you're married, you probably didn't expect to marry your spouse. It might have been the person who you least thought you would be interested in. And then here you are married to that person, right? You're probably likely not in a career field that you expected to be in. I never thought I would be in financial services. I never thought that I would be a pastor of a church. I just never thought that. It was not on my radar at all. I was going to be a hockey player. I didn't really believe that. I wasn't good enough, didn't start enough. I didn't start early enough. But when we are on this, there are negative connotations and there are positive connotations. Some of the negative ones, like our children, you can think of negative ones. Kids expect everything these days, right? Like it's not there. They unzip it's like they don't understand how their lunch gets into the bag. It's like it's just in there. They open it up, they unzip it, they expect something to be in there. They expect a roof to be over their head. They expect the water to turn on. They expect when they flip a light switch, lights turn on. They have nothing to do with the power bill being paid or the wires that bring it to your house or nothing. They just expect, they've learned to expect those things. So expectations can be good and they can be bad. And we're going to talk about both of them this morning. Expectations are a belief that springs from a person's thought process when examining evidence. Let me read that again. Expectations are a belief that springs from a person's thought process when examining evidence. So we look out into the world, or we look out into our future of our lives, right? You guys do that. I hope you do that in some ways. There's good expectations, but sometimes we put undue expectations on our futures. Our expectations are not always right because of the origins of our logic, the way that our mind is wired in thinking. If you're a very selfish person, you may go into a lot of relationships and environments expecting people to serve you, cater to your every need, and those are not good expectations. The scriptures tell us that we should serve and not be served. That's how our lives should be. And when dealing with motivation from our flesh, our expectations will always be directed for self-fulfillment, which makes them sinful expectations. If we always think that people are there to serve us and do these things and make your life better, make my life better, those are coming from a place of your flesh saying, you would never say this, I'm better than these people, and they should do things for me for free. That's what we're saying when we expect something from another person. It comes from a flesh-centered, sinful place. Proverbs 10:28 says this, should be on the screen. The hope of the righteous brings joy, but the expectation of the wicked will perish. The hope of the righteous brings joy, but the expectation of the wicked will perish. Sometimes we get our hopes up based on a false premise or misreading of evidence, don't we? You've all been let down, right? A letting down is because you had an expectation that didn't come to fruition. Being let down is just something that you believed you're like deserved or it was coming to you. And we've all seen movies where the guy, I think of Christmas Vacation, where he builds the pool, he's doing all this thing because he's expecting his Christmas bonus. And that whole movie is about Chevy Chase getting this Christmas bonus, and then he doesn't get that check. And he made life choices on that. Like he leveraged the family on that and needed that check and was let down. See, often we form expectations automatically without conscious effort. It just pops in our mind. I don't think you ever, I don't know about you, you're different than me, but I think we're similar in some ways. I don't ever sit around thinking like, I'm going to make you make goals lists, right? 3 year, 1 year, 3 year, 5 years. Have you ever sat down and made an expectations list? Like, I expect this thing to happen for me. It's like, we don't expect those things. It's like, we just see the world and we go, yeah, that should come to me. That should be here for me. It just kind of automatically happens. Our flesh just conjures these things up that we think that we deserve or that we should have. Oftentimes out of envy because we see somebody else who we, if we're honest, think we're better than them and we deserve more than them. And they got something. Well, if they got something, if they got a good job, I should have a good job, right? If they got married, I should be married. If they got a car, I should have a new car. You guys are following me. That's where expectations come. We look around, we see what other people are getting, other people are having, and we're like, yeah, I deserve that too. I should have that. And when expectations are not met, pain ensues. And we often place blame on on the something or someone who did not live up to our expectations, even if our expectations were unreasonable. I'm not going to ask for a show of hands, but have you ever in a relationship had an expectation that was unreasonable? You expected for them to pay for something. You expected for them to drive and you ended up driving. You expected them to, you fill in the blank, you expected something, it didn't, but it was unreasonable. It wasn't communicated. Now, I want you to write this down. This is important. Frustration. How many of you have ever been frustrated? Let's get our hands up for the. You ever been frustrated? Some of you got 2 hands up. If you're online, you ever been frustrated? Frustration is unrealized expectation. Write that down. Frustration equals unrealized expectation. So what I'm saying here is if you want to be frustrated, come up with unreasonable expectations and you can guarantee yourself a life of frustration, bitterness, anger, all of those things. What are some harmful expectations? Well, I'm going to talk about one because I got married many years ago. And each and every one of us, if you ever get married or any person, we've all grown up some way, right? So your mom or dad or somebody, maybe dad always got up on Saturday morning and made pancakes for the family or whatever that thing is. Maybe there's a tradition. Or mom always had breakfast on the table or mom always had dinner on the table. And you just kind of get to be, that's how your life is, right? That's your privilege in your life, whatever that thing is. Or someone always drove you somewhere or you just get in the car, right? Like I get frustrated sometimes because I look at other people and like every time we get in the car and I'm with Janie, she wants me to drive. Even if we're just going around and I got to change her seat position and all that kind of stuff. It's like, this is a hassle. We're going 1.5 miles and she's like handing me her keys. And I'm like, it's just right there. And I got to mess with the mirrors and mess with the seat. And, I got to get in at first and I'm going to bang my head on the pillar, and it's like, it's a frustration of mine. I shouldn't expect her to drive when we go somewhere. She also shouldn't expect me to drive when I'm just kidding. But those are things that you might expect, right? It's like, so then oftentimes when I get in the car and then I look over and we're going somewhere with the minks and then Amanda's driving, I'm like, doggone it. How come she's driving 150 miles and Janie's not driving? Bart's over there just reading a book or doing whatever, playing Angry Birds on his phone or whatever, Plants vs. Zombies. I get a little jealous, all right? I'm going to be done with me right here for a minute. But the reality is in all of our lives, we expect things to happen. You expect someone to do your laundry. You expect to do all the laundry. Or maybe you expect to do all the cooking because you love cooking. And, you get into a relationship and they're like, oh, I want to cook too. And you're like, oh, but your cooking is so terrible. Maybe you don't say that, but it's like, it's not good. And, you could do better. And then frustration comes out. So marriage is a big one. When people come together, how are household chores? How are the things around the house? If you expect somebody who's going to take care of the finances, somebody, nobody, everybody, are we going to argue over this? These are all decisions that have to come. And the reality is we've all come from a background where these things kind of get done. Because in everybody's life, everything has to get done and somebody has to do it. But it's not always us who does all of those things. So maybe in your house, mom did it all. Maybe you expected when you got into marriage, like cooking, there'd be dinner on the table at 5 o'clock because that's when dinner is supposed to be on the table. It has been for 25 years. And that doesn't happen. If you expected that to happen, you're going to get frustrated. You're going to get frustrated for sure. About meals, and I know I've counseled people who want to eat out like one of them wants to eat out all the time and the other one hates eating out. It's like they just want to eat out all the time. It's so costly and the food's not good for you. And, it's like, but this is just what we've always done. We always had Taco Bell and McDonald's and fast food on the fly. And then all those things are expectations that we shouldn't have. They come from a place that's going to create frustration and angst in relationships. How about work? You get into a company and maybe they alluded to something in the interview. Oh, we're going to have you as our salesperson. You get in there and you think, man, within a year or two, I'm going to be the top salesperson. And then a year or two in, you get overlooked for the promotion for the top salesperson or whatever that is. Or they kind of promise you something and that doesn't happen. It's like you get frustrated, right? What about retirement? I mean, we all think that retirement's going to be better than when we're working, right? Because we're not working. But what I know from helping people with their finances, they're going to have little money in retirement, and they're going to want to go back to work because they don't have any nickels to spend in this world. And that's difficult, and it's a problem. How about your health? You expect to be healthy? We all just think, hey, we're just going to be healthy until we die at 95 years old. Well, hey, look around, guys. That's not happening. We're sick people and things are going to happen. Your back's going to start to hurt. I mean, I go to sleep now. And, I used to jump ramps and off roofs and things like that. And that's how I would get. If I woke up and I go, oh, that kind of hurts for an hour or two. And then I'm fine. Now I just go to sleep. And apparently sleeping is dangerous to your health if you're over 40 years old and a male. Because I wake up and I'm like, that didn't hurt when I went to sleep. What happened? Was there rocks in my bed? Did Janie kick me? What happened in my sleep? I expect to be healthy, but guess what? Those expectations should not be part of my life because things are going to happen in this life. You know what? I might get diabetes. Just look at the people who are further in your family and see the kind of things that they have. You probably should expect to have some of those things, if not all of those conditions, and prepare yourself for it, or you're going to be upset. You're going to be frustrated. Children, we expect children to act a certain way. Like, oh, they're just going to be good and clean their room and go to bed on time and take baths. And no, No. I don't remember being as difficult as my children are sometimes. I'm sure I was. Don't look at my dad. He's probably nodding his head. But the reality is I don't remember being that difficult. And it's not always difficult, and I love them to death, but it's like, why is this hard? I've asked 92 trillion times for that to be done. Hey, pick up that towel when you go to your bed. They walk right past it, like it wasn't even there. They had to step over it, like they acknowledged it was there because they stepped over it. They knew it needed to go to their room. See, all these areas can wreak havoc on our emotions if we get too invested in our future expectations. All these things can wreak havoc on our lives if we get too invested in what we think our lives are going to be like. I'm going to ask you a question. We're living in the present right now. How many of you ever had a clear picture that your life would look just like it does right now? Nobody. I'm imagining everybody online watching this would also say the same thing. So what makes you think that the expectation you have of your life being 10 years from now is going to be exactly how you picture your life being 10 years from now? If it's not now what you thought it was going to be, why do we think we made a mistake there? But you know what? In 5 years, it's going to be the way I expect it to be. The truth is, if you guys are following what I'm laying down, if you're picking up what I'm laying down, the truth is, we don't know what our lives are going to be like. I can't say that. I could say maybe 10 or 15% of what's going on in my life is what I expected to be going on in my life at this time in my life. And that's just the truth. And I'm happy about those. I'm happy about most everything else that's going in my life too. That's also something I love. But putting energy into future expectations is almost fruitless. Because there's a very little likelihood that your life is going to end up exactly like you think it's going to in most areas of your life. See, and thinking it's going to can just play mental games and wreak havoc on our emotions if we get too invested in that and it doesn't happen. Janie and I, we've talked for years since we got married about fostering, right? Now we get to a point, God opens the door for a house, so we have the room, we go through the process, we know that there's thousands of kids in foster care. And it's like, oh man, as soon as they clear us, man, within a week we're going to have a kid in our home. We were approved on February 1st, I believe, or the end of January, and there's still not a child in our home. Got a call last week from our social worker, and she called, and it was her, and I was like, she's like, it's Morgan, you got time to talk? And I'm like, yes, we're about to get a kid. They're about to drop a kid on us. And then she went through, well, I have multiples. I've got a 9-month-old, and you need to take all three of these, a 9-month-old, a 9-year-old, and or whatever it was. I'm like, oh, we can't do the 9-month-old. And then she's like, well, we also have 2 boys, but they're Muslim boys, and they have to observe all of their Muslim customs. You got to do special meals and take them to mosque and do all these things. And I'm like, we can't do that. We can't take 2 boys. It's just it's not feasible for us to do that. So Janie had gotten a call while she was at work, and she calls me. I think she's a little excited because I had talked to Morgan. I'm like, don't get your hopes up. I mean, it's not going to happen with these. But that doesn't mean that the promise that God has given us is dead. It just means that we have to continue to wait and be patient. See, we expected to be foster and adoptive parents, and it hasn't happened yet. But God knows the child that's going to be placed into our home. And we're waiting patiently for those things to happen. Don't give up when the timing isn't what you expected. Don't give up when the timing isn't what you expected. So I want to talk about, just for a moment here, why we should break free from expectation. One, I believe it robs us of our contentment and our joy and our peace. So when God says, I've come to give you life and that more abundantly, He didn't say, I want to unpack I want you to just let your mind go with expectations so you can just be it can wreak havoc on your psyche. What God is saying is say, be patient, be content with what you have, so it doesn't rob you of your contentment, your joy, and your peace. Because God's come to give us contentment and joy and peace, even in the process. But those expectations, if we allow our minds to run with them and our hearts to leave us and go with them, when they don't happen, it hurts. Why should we break free from expectation? If expectations are not met, conflict will arise. If expectations are not met, conflict will arise. So the question is then, how do we avoid conflict? How do we avoid conflict from expectations with other people? It's usually with other people. It's not just in our own mind. It's usually with someone else, somewhere else, some other environment. How do we avoid this conflict? Number one, I want you to write this down, communicate. As Americans, we're oftentimes very poor at communicating. We're usually really good at passive aggression. We're usually good at being overtly aggressive. But communicating and hearing the other side is not something that's often the case. I've not met in counseling dozens of couples. I've not met very often ones that clearly communicate their point, their position, without emotion, and then it's heard on the other side. Communication is nearly always the issue in marriages, in relationships, in friendships. Miscommunication is almost always the issue. In relationships with anybody, openness and honesty with ourselves and with others is the first key. Be open and honest. You probably watch these movies or you've seen TV shows where, hey, they date and then they're like, oh, do you want kids? Oh, yeah, I want kids. And the other one's just like, no, just kind of goes along with it. And then they get married and it's like, hey, let's have kids. And the other one's like, they seem like they're costly and I never really wanted them. And what? I expected to have children in this relationship. I expected this to happen. So be open and honest with yourselves and with others is the first key. We all fail ourselves and others in many ways, and we should be able to admit when we're wrong, right? There you failed people. I have. I've said things and just forgotten them completely with some of you in this room. Several of you in this room. It's like, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to do that. I'm just human, and I got a lot of things going on in my life, and sometimes other things take priority, right? The things that I know need to happen this current week, they're all in a list of priorities in my mind right now for the most part. But something could happen. My mom could go into the hospital, and all that other stuff goes out the window. I'll be right there in the hospital day in and day out, and whatever else was on my plate, it's probably not going to happen. In each of our lives, those things are oftentimes true. So if you fail somebody else, just be willing to admit that you failed someone else and let somebody else fail you, because we have to let that open and honest in the communication. So along the way, like when and this is the thing, when something's not going to happen, if somebody's like, oh, I'm so excited about that trip that we're going on, and you're like, I already kind of know that I can't get the vacation off my request, but you don't have the guts to tell them, and just be honest. Just tell them. When you know something, tell something. When you know something, tell it. Don't wait until you find out, or to let them find out later, like right before. Like, oh man, I'm sick, can't make it. Oh, I'm sick, I can't make it. And we should base our expectations on, in communicating, base our expectations on verifiable truth. So when you're talking with somebody and you're communicating and they're saying something, just, okay, is that going to be able to happen? Like, get the facts about it, right? Like, if you're concerned in your communication with someone else, ask clarifying questions. Ask clarifying questions. Like, oh, I'm not really sure about it. You said this, but it could mean two things. I want to know what you were actually trying to communicate in that. And then lastly, for communication, we should discuss others' expectations and what theirs are. When you get into a relationship with somebody and, hey, they might think you want to be best friends and you don't have time for a best friend. Like, you don't have time to go out, 3 times a week and spend 8 hours together on a Saturday. And that's just not part of your life. You got to be clear about those things. You got to be clear. I can't do that. Here's what I can give. I've let people down because even in building this church, I know single people who have all the time in the world or a lot of time. And the time that I have is not a lot of time. And a lot of my time needs to go to my wife and my children. So I can't give to anybody something like a single person could give if they just have a job and something else. So I got to communicate clearly, like, hey, if you think we're going to be buddies and we're going to spend 30 hours a week together, it's not going to happen. I can't make that happen. That's not a commitment that I can make. Secondly, how do we avoid conflict? We forgive. It's a big one. We forgive. The Bible says forgive and you'll be forgiven. Right? It's easy to forgive somebody when they ask for forgiveness and they're humble about it and you want to forgive them and you want to be forgiven also. See, the people in Jesus' day, the Jews, before Jesus came, they were expecting a Messiah. For centuries, they were expecting a Messiah. And the reality is they had some unrealistic expectations of what he would do. So when you think, hey, we're persecuted and there's going to be a king and a ruler and he's going to come, and we think, oh, he's going to come with an iron fist and crush everyone around us and make everything right. And I'm sure this is part of the culture. He's going to come, just wipe the earth, and we're going to have, and it's just going to be Jews everywhere, and he's going to plant his kingdom and nobody will be able to touch it because our God reigns supreme. And that's kind of what they were thinking. They wanted a Messiah to free them from Rome. And they wrongly expected Jesus to establish his empire here in a physical way. They wrongly expected that. And then when he didn't fulfill their expectations, they were frustrated and angry enough to kill their own Messiah. They're angry enough to kill their own Messiah. But Jesus forgave them. It says in Luke 23:34, Jesus said, Father, when he's on the cross, forgive them, for they do not know what they do. I realize they're frustrated with me, God, but they don't know what they're doing. And if Jesus Christ can forgive us for putting him on the cross, we can forgive others for the things that we expected from them. Forgive. The last one is love. How do we avoid conflict? We love. 1 Corinthians 13:4-7 says, love is patient, love is kind, it does not insist on its own way. Love is patient, love is kind, and love does not insist on its own way. How many of us insist on our own way? We expect it to be that way, our way. The more people you get together, everybody's expectations come together. It's like, oh, we thought we were going to have, more of this or more of that and more. Hey, you got to roll with the punches. The more people you get together, you can't satisfy everybody, right? You can't come into a large group of people doing something and expect that it's all going the way that you expected it to go. Love is patient, kind. It does not insist on its own way. If we've formed expectations for friends or loved ones that they cannot live up to, it's not their fault. It's on us to forgive and love and not insist on our own way, to let it go. I hate that movie Frozen, but that song, Let It Go. Let it go. Heard that a million times. Hey guys, guess what? Frozen 2's coming out this winter. I'm so excited. If you want to go with me, that's not going to happen. Don't get your expectations up. We have the power to change our expectations. And if we find that our expectations of others are unreasonable, we should be flexible enough to change. Love is a verb. Love takes action. Love moves us. So is expectation ever a good thing? Yes. We want to break free from unrealistic expectation, uncommunicated expectations, and stand firm in anticipation for God's moves in our lives. There is good expectation. When God moves in your lives, it's something that we can look. And then lastly, we need to forgive so that we can be forgiven. Now, there are some expectations we need to hang on to, the realistic ones, the kingdom ones. The dreams that we believe God has put in our heart, like Melissa. She didn't know when her ministry was going to, she doesn't know when it's going to take off, but she's continued to keep that on the forefront. Why? Because God is doing something in her life so he can do something in other people's lives. We need to hang on to those. Philippians 1:20 and 21 says this, "As it is my eager expectation and hope that I will not be ashamed, but that with full courage, now as always, Christ will be honored in my body, whether by life or by death. For to me to live is Christ, and to die is gain. It is my eager expectation and hope," it said again, "that I will not be ashamed." We expect God to do good things, that he's going to use our life for good things, and we should look forward to those things, that we can be a better father, a better friend, a better neighbor, that we would use our mouth to encourage people and not tear people down. We should expect those things. And if you're not expecting life change, you should. If you're a Christ follower, like Jesus Christ, perfect God, comes into our lives, into our, and if we're honest, messed up lives, right? We don't have it all together. If you got it all together, teach me some things. But if you don't, when we realize when Jesus Christ comes into our lives, he's going to have to do, we're fixer-uppers, right? Like some of us are houses that just need to be flipped. I mean, not that he needs to move out, but there's some stuff. We got to tear some walls out, and some things need to be removed, and there's rotten floorboards. And when Jesus gets in our lives, he sees those things, and he's going to want to start taking action on those. And you should expect life change. But don't expect your life to necessarily get easier. Don't expect your life to necessarily get easier. There's no promise of an easier, more luxurious, quiet life. It's quite the contrary. Our lives will get difficult. The Bible tells us that oftentimes there will be persecution and suffering in our lives, but this life is just so short compared to all of eternity. See, the promise, what we should look forward to, the promise that we get Jesus. You get a friend that's faithful, who sticks closer than a brother. You get a master who brings purpose and life into your life. You get those things. Jesus is enough. Jesus is always enough for us. See, the Bible promises that in this life there will be suffering, but that for the followers, it ends in glory. We anticipate this life eventually being over. We're not giving up. We're not going to stop working. We're going to work hard through the end of this life. We're going to serve well. We're going to love well. We're going to bring the kingdom, but that at the end, no more pain, no more suffering, none of that. No more expectation. It will all be there. That day is coming, my friends. See, our faith is not just a believing faith, though, but it's a doing faith. Let's put action into it. These expectations that are good, that are godly, that are kingdom-minded, let's put action to them. These things in your life, you know, God's not just going to come into your life and just begin ripping up floorboards and do all the work on your own. You're like, hey, as long as I show up and hear the teaching, as long as I, sing the song or read my Bible occasionally, God's just going to fix everything. Nope. We're co-laborers in this mission with God. He's going to ask you to do things in your life. You got to take steps and be in uncomfortable places and say no to things that are harming you and all of that. It's how our life happens. Life change happens. You don't go, okay, let me put it this way. You don't get physically fit by buying a gym membership, or everybody in the United States would be physically fit. You actually have to go to that gym and get on that machine and use it. And then not just once. You got to use it continually. You got to continue to work out your muscles and your body. Because if it were that easy, everybody would just have a gym membership and pay $15 a month, and we would all be in great shape. The same thing is true of Christianity. You can't just come, you can't buy the membership to church and be like, you know what, my life's going to be good, everything's going to go away, my life is going to change. All's good. No, you have to put your faith into action. You've got to get on the treadmill. You got to start moving. That's how life change happens. So what do we need to do, guys? We need to be obedient. We need to be obedient to the things God says to us. We got to give mercy and grace, and we got to forgive. We got to learn how to tame our tongues. We have to be sober-minded. We have to use wholesome talk. We have to encourage people. We have to be disciplined in our faith. These are all things that we need to work on, action steps that we need to take as we've broken free from the expectation of a life that wasn't promised to us, that oftentimes will lead us to frustration and angerness and bitterness. Walk away from those things and replace it with obedience, mercy, grace, faithfulness. Tame your tongue. Be sober-minded. Talk wholesome. Encourage people. Discipline people. Or discipline your life and forgive. Those are what we have to put in place. And let those expectations, those ungodly expectations, just fall by the wayside. We need to serve. See, the reason we're so oriented around service is because in service with other people, we have to learn how to get along. We have to learn how to love one another. We have to learn to put our expectations to the side. We have to learn to encourage people in what they're doing. We have to learn to have conversations about introducing people to Christ. We have to learn all kinds of how to work with others, plays well with others. Like, on the report card when you're little, it's like plays well with others, and maybe you got a satisfactory or an unsatisfactory, or maybe you got an excellent, or we don't know what it is. But in this kingdom of God, we have to learn how to play well with others also. Put our expectations to the side. I'm going to ask Vanessa to come up and close us in prayer, and then I'll be back up just for a moment, and I've got a benediction, and but she's going to go over offering and close us in prayer today. So.
Lord, thank you so much for this time. Thank you for just the challenge of learning how to let go of some of the things that we hold so tightly onto, and the things that we put on others, and the expectations that we live within. And Lord, we are so thankful that you give us so many chances to figure this out, because we mess it up sometimes daily. And so we're thankful for the opportunity to start fresh today, and to leave with this new reminder of learning how to let go of some of the things that we hold so tightly to, Lord. And so we just ask that you would just give us this new mindset of learning how to love without expectation, learning how to forgive, learning how to be at peace with each other, and that we would just see the fruit and the growth from that. We're so thankful for moments like this where we get to have a fresh start. And so, Lord, we're humbled, and we're appreciative, Lord, of what it is that you're doing in our lives. We ask that you would continue to bless us, continue to challenge us, go before this week, keep us safe, and just allow us to be a blessing and an encouragement to someone else. We love you so much, Lord. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.